"I'll help," Megan said, "on one condition." That startled her roommate. Meg was usually a pushover. She'd never be expected to put up an argument, unless it was all that dick she'd been getting that made her start to develop a backbone. "What is it?" Nev asked. "You help me with something else later on." "Oh, Christ, of course I will. Anything, you know that. But we have to move." "Cross your heart." "Jesus, we don't have time." "Do it." Her voice was unexpectedly firm. "Jesus, cross my heart, Scout's honor." "Okay. We'll need, hell, I don't know, a bag or..." She was scanning the dark room and coming up with nothing. Nev sighed helplessly. "They're going to be heavy, aren't they?" she said. Megan nodded, absently fingering the amulet beneath her shirt. Then Nev's face brightened. "That cart! There's a janitor's cart I see now and then with a big old thick yellow bag in it. It's got to be either parked somewhere in a corner or..." "Let's go." They hurried out of the dark room, through the rooms of the photography department, and out onto the hallway. Heavy silence hung down both directions. The stairs were only a short distance to the right, switchbacks leading down to the second floor and up to the third and fourth. They ran to them and went up, neither of them remembering seeing the cart anywhere downstairs, so not bothering to check there. Megan thought that, with her luck, the damn thing would be locked up in a closet somewhere. Pausing at the third floor to glance around the corner, seeing nothing, they kept on up to the fourth. With quailing stomachs, they raced down the hall, looking through the small windows in the classroom doors, hoping that it might be on the other side of one of them. By the time they got to the far end, the fear was setting in again. They took the steps downstairs 5 at a time, didn't bother stopping for a closer inspection of the third floor, and when they rounded the corner on the second floor, they almost tripped over, of all things, a helicopter flying over me. I don't have time to do another take. There have been enough interruptions. Oh, by the way, the volcano looks lovely. They took the steps downstairs 5 at a time, didn't bother stopping for a closer inspection of the third floor, and when they rounded the corner on the second floor, they almost tripped over, of all things, a good-sized dolly that neither one of them remembered seeing earlier. They glanced at each other, thinking the same thing, and seized the metal arch above the handles, turned and dragged it behind them as they ran back to photography. Even more surprising, they came across a couple of bungee cords, lying like snakes in the middle of the floor. The girl's eyes were wide with appreciation of these gifts from fate. Nev snatched them up, thinking no one could be this lucky. Oh, thank you, God! On top of it all, a ream of heavy-duty garbage bags just happened to be leaning against the wall next to the dark-room door by the trash can when they returned. Conveniently large garbage bags. The plan did not need to be discussed between them, as they both had made it up independently on the spot. Shaking the bags loose from each other, they both hastily went in and dragged the bodies out of the tub and stuffed them head first into a bag that, God be praised, was almost as long as they were tall. It took them a minute to get them laid out straight inside, tight against one another, and they found that even more repulsive than the fact that they were handling 2 dead bodies. Once the bag was stretched all the way to the feet, Nev and Megan struggled to right them. Nev didn't remember what the stiffening of dead bodies was called, either rigor or livor mortis, or which one of them set in first, but they were definitely getting stiff. She avoided even looking to see if the other rumor was true, that if a man died with a hard-on, it remained erect. The very thought of 2 stiff dicks made her shudder. They wrestled their burden upright and dragged it against the concave spine of the dolly, and Nev, the stronger one, held it there while Megan looked the bungee cords and stretched them around and around until they were taut, hooking the other ends and securing the bodies about the knees and midriffs. Before casting off, they glanced back at the tub. In the red light, the blood looked just as conspicuous as it would in the sunshine. Nev looked around the dark room again at all the jugs of different chemicals used to develop photographs and fuck with them artistically. Think. Shit. If they stuck around to clean up before wheeling the bodies away, they'd surely be caught. If they took care of the bodies first, someone would come in and see the blood before they got back. She snatched up a bottle of hypo whatever it was called, developing fluid, some stuff Sage had told her could be used in place of P2P, that's phenyl-2-propanone, to make crystal meth, because she noticed a warning symbol on the side that said it was flammable. Highly flammable. She twisted off the cap and sloshed the stuff on the wall and over the tub, dousing every splatter of blood. She read about something new the police had now, luminol, this stuff you spray that'll light up a spot where blood had been washed away, even if it had been long ago. There was nothing you could use to conceal spilt blood anymore. What is that stuff? Megan asked. Never mind, stop pushing them out of here. I'll be with you in just a minute. She was digging a cigarette out of her soft pack. We don't have time. I'll explain later. Start moving. Megan scowled, teeth bared, but turned and leaned the dolly back on its wheels, grunting at the weight. Put her shoulder into it and pushed. The dolly wobbled, and in a flash she realized what Nev was doing and had an idea. Wait, before you do that, use one of my cigarettes instead. Nev looked at her blankly. You smoke the same cigarettes as Nick, and his go out if you don't keep puffing on them. Mine'll burn all the way to the filter. Use mine. Nev nodded, somewhat surprised, and reached out to dig Megan's pack out of the pocket she swiveled her hip to indicate. It wasn't coming out easily, and Megan was straining to hold up the dolly, but she didn't say anything, knowing that whatever she did say would slow Nev down more. Finally, with most of the cigarettes mashed inside the pack, they came free, and Megan shoved the dolly again. It wobbled just like before, panicking her, and she tripped while overcorrecting its yaw. She managed to catch herself, but the dolly shot out ahead of her, and she scrambled to keep up with it, almost dropping the handles. As soon as she was stable with the weight, a bright flash and hiss of flames made her jump with fright and drop the truck altogether. What the fuck? Nev turned her from the fire she'd started, the bottle of hypo-something in one hand, dripping. Oh shit, she said, and then a bolt of rippling flame caught the thin stream of dribbling fluid and raced up it into the bottle, setting it ablaze in her hand. She yelped and flung it away, regretting it an instant later. Oh shit. Why the hell did you do that? Megan shouted. I thought it was going to blow up. Neither of them moved, both thinking the bottle might still, as soon as they reached for it. Bam! So they stood wringing their hands like two children who'd played with matches and didn't know what to do about the forest fire they'd started. Not much had spilled out onto the floor, but the bottle's mouth was still belching little yellow tongues, the puddle glowing with ripples like waves surging across a tiny sea. Oh, fuck. Excuse me. They jumped, shrieking, tripping over themselves and hitting the floor as they tried to turn and see who'd spoken. A woman chuckled at their fright and pushed past them with a fire extinguisher, proceeded in to fill the room with white smoke. You two might want to get somewhere, she said. They scrambled to their feet and hurried to right the dolly, getting in each other's way like a pair of bungling Keystone cops. The fog was billowing about them like a smokescreen, and they took advantage of it, rushing the bodies out of the darkroom and crashing into everything along the way. As they collided with furniture and equipment in the next rooms of the photography department, Megan risked a glance backward, seeing no one. They turned around and started pulling the dolly behind them instead of pushing, and found the going much easier. Making it into the hallway, they looked in both directions before yanking the dolly hard into the door jamb, splintering the molding. They cursed and tried again. This time they glanced it off of the other jamb and spilled out into the checkered top vinyl floor. Cursing louder and then shushing each other, they rolled to their feet and tugged the dolly up and after them toward the stairway, running full tilt. As they made the turn at the corner, the wheels slid and the base of the dolly fishtailed. They let it keep going, not knowing how to take a dolly downstairs, having never had to do it before. The wheels bounced off of the aluminum checker-plated concrete steps, the weight gaining speed, and the handles of the dolly just slipped out of the girls' hands. They watched in horror as it jounced down the stairs, the metal truck clanging again and again and again, the bodies under the tearing plastic jumping like chicks trying to bash their way out of eggshells. At the landing, instead of stopping, the dolly rose upright, fell forward to crash against the wall, and ricocheted. Falling backwards against the railing's corner, it turned, tipped, and clattered to the concrete landing, bounced a little, slid, and seesawed at the edge of the top step on the last flight down. The deafening noise echoed through the halls, and through it came a sprinkling of distant, "What the fuck was that?" Panic again cut through the paralyzing fear, and they rushed down the stairs to put the bodies back on straight, shake out another bag to slide over them and the dolly's backing, covering all the holes and exposed flesh. "Need a hand?" a voice asked, the same as before. Nev and Megan gasped, looking up at the top of the stairs. A woman stood there, the one who'd come into the dark room. She looked Hispanic, with long, curly black hair that cascaded over her shoulders and looked greasy, in baggy work pants and men's work boots, with a rumpled blue Belmont-striped white button-down shirt tied beneath her breasts. She looked messy the way an actress or a model would be made to look, with a black smear across half of her forehead and a dark smudge on one cheek where she'd absently wiped sweat from her face with the back of a sooty hand, or scratched an itch or whatever. It looked the way chicks are made to look for photos of girls who pull their own weight. Megan wasn't sure why she was thinking that. Maybe because she was a handsome woman with obvious strength who was showing up like Deus Ex Machina. "Eyes are stinging from all that smoke," she said, coming down the stairs. "I can barely see. But it's not bad enough I can't help you carry whatever it is you've got there." Her accent sounded Cuban, heavily, but nice. Nev looked at Megan. "We got it all right, thanks, though." "Oh, you do you? That's why it looks like a tornado hit back there. Shit, I need some Visine. You got any?" She came down the steps toward them. "No, sorry," Megan said, rallying herself. "But yeah, we'd love a hand with this thing, at least to the first floor." Nev shot her an alarmed look, but Megan made faces back that read, "She can't see us distinctly, so we'll be okay. And really, you want to carry this thing?" The Hispanic woman bent down when she reached them and gathered up the dolly. One wheel was hanging at a wobbling angle, and it would be a problem dragging it down after her, so she heaved the entire load up and laid it across one shoulder instead. The girls stared. "Heavy," she grunted, but it sounded like she only meant it for their benefit. She wasn't struggling to hold the weight of two dead men. At all. Students had appeared at the base of the stairs, drawn by the noise, but stepped aside when the woman came down with the other two following. They turned the corner when they got to the floor and went to the glass doors of the art building's entrance. "Mind getting that for me?" she asked. Megan felt awfully stupid at having to be asked and went to hold one of the doors with her head down and followed the woman and her roommate outside. Setting her burden down, Senorita turned to them and smiled a crooked half smile. "You should be able to get it from here." She sauntered back inside. Nev and Megan stared at each other for a long time, not knowing what to say, until more students came drifting to class and the girls remembered their fear. They nervously started pushing the dolly along the paved walkway that led toward the edge of campus closest to their apartment, both of them jumping twice at the bangs of newspaper boxes' metal doors slamming shut. Megan almost lost it again when a girl came walking past them from behind, glancing their way, and it was Mrs. Nick herself. Megan restrained herself, though, barely, and Gwyn Hutchinson marched on with 3 stolen bottles of hypo-something in her backpack, wiping the pink and irritated corners of her eyes, steel-smelling fire extinguisher fog. The door of 318 swung open, the girls staggering through, and as soon as it was shut, they both sagged against it, sighing deeply. "Thank you, Meg." "Yeah, don't mention it." They dragged themselves down the hall into the living room, collapsed into their rattan chairs, and Nev dug out cigarettes, handing Megan hers. In black and white, Rabbit watched them fish their lighters out of their tight jeans pockets, heard from the speakers the rasp of the grind wheels against the flints as if he was next to them. He lit a cigarette and twirled it between his fingers like Val Kilmer, practicing, blew smoke rings out at the monitor, and waited, absently stroking the lines around his mouth where his goatee used to be, like an amputee fingering his stump. Nev got up after a few minutes to get a couple of long necks out of the fridge, brought them back and handed one to Megan. Her roommate wasn't fond of beer, would sneer and say that it tasted like piss that somebody farted in, but she sure appreciated it now. Drank half of it in one go and visibly relaxed. "We might have to move them," she said eventually. Nev nodded slowly. "Been thinking that too. When the busboys go to throw the trash out, yeah, they might see them in there." "I know, but what do we do? Dismantle them with chainsaws?" They fell silent again. The dumpster's behind Allegra's, Rabbit was thinking. He'd seen them stopping there on the GPS tracker, their little green blip courtesy of the sapphire amulet around Megan's neck, pausing a moment and then moving much faster through the alley towards home as if they were no longer encumbered by the weight of the dolly. That must be it. Walking distance from campus, a secluded area close to home, convenient. "I'm sorry," Nev said. Megan didn't answer. "Why did this have to happen?" Rabbit smiled. With the developing fluid, Gwyn had almost everything she needed. Distilled drinking water, no suds, no scent ammonia, lithium strips out of the size D copper tops, muriatic acid, red phosphorus from a certain brand of drain cleaner, ether from a certain brand of starter fluid, iodine crystals, epinephrine pills, and a few other ingredients, things she didn't have to reach too far to obtain, and she would be back in the meth business. Meth beat the shit out of having to sell crack on 22nd Street or Nebraska Avenue. Not even Tamarind back in West Palm was as bad as parts of Tampa. Plus, college kids aren't as big on crack as they are on crank, since crack doesn't help much for cram sessions, and getting more than one professor hooked on butterscotch cubes would be an unlikely accomplishment. Plus, Guavaween was coming up. There was a high demand right there. What she was needing was supply. Best not get crackin'. On top of that, the 45 days were almost up for the acid to be ready. Either tomorrow or the next day, she wasn't sure. Dozens of mason jars hidden away, ryegrass seed moldy and rotting in darkness, 15 pounds worth of one of the most horrible poisons known to man. Well, provided she'd done it right. If she did it right, all that work would yield her a whole gallon of LSD. 1 whole gallon. One tiny drop was worth $5, and how the hell many droplets were in a gallon? She could have sworn it was on a measurement chart in the dictionary, but she couldn't find the damn thing in the cluttered pigsty she called a bedroom. Efficiency my ass, she thought. More like a hole in the wall, she could have told them. The people who came up with the term efficiency, but nobody asked her. She racked her brains. Gallon, pint, quart, cup, gill, ounce. Drop? Droplet? What came in between? Ah, fuck it, she'd have to do math anyway. Last night had been the first time in a long while that she'd smoked the crack she made. Had to hand her to herself. It was some pretty good shit. She was still tweaking off of it. Hadn't gotten a wink since leaving Braswell's house. She had to laugh. He couldn't even get it up after he'd smoked it all. Didn't even seem to want to get it up. When she bade him farewell, he was down on his hands and knees, studying the floor like a goddamn bird hunting for worms, coming up with pebbles that had been shaken loose from the treads in his shoe soles, bits of God knows what had accumulated since the last time he'd vacuumed, even toenail clippings, packing them into the stem she'd given him as a present. Well, that's not entirely true. She hadn't given him the pipe. She'd pretended to forget about it sitting on the end table, and he snagged it, thinking that he'd pull a fast one on her and gotten away with it, just like she'd wanted him to. Now, as her eyeballs jiggled and her heart started to flutter, she felt the high waning. Good, now I can get some damn sleep before I go to work. She checked her watch. Shit, she was supposed to be in answering phones in less than 20 minutes. My, how time does fly. She glanced at the cabinet in her kitchenette where the batch of crack was, tried to look away, but her eyes kept sliding back to it. There was another pipe in her bedroom, the glass one she smoked weed with. No, don't even think about it. But I'll be a zombie at work. How am I supposed to talk on the phone and represent the university if I can't? Well, maybe. No, resist, be strong. Wait, who am I kidding? I can resist this shit, it's nothing. I did it before. I'll only smoke this one little bit to get me through the day, that's all. A little dab will do you. Now where's my lighter? Megan called the Heathers, putting the Froome number as an extension, and the phone just rang and rang. She hung up, redialing without the extra numbers, and a moment later the front desk picked up. I'm sorry, the man's voice said. Mr. Caniglio is checked out. Megan's eyes burned as she hung up the phone, tears gathering that she tried to blink away. Shit. He's gone. The last day and he's gone. God damn you, Nev. Seeing the 2 phone books on the floor out of the corner of her eye, she went over and started flipping through them. Pinellas County and... no. Hillsborough? Shit, unlisted there too. After a moment, she thought of looking under H for Hutchinson, and Christ, there were a lot of Hutchinsons in the both of them. Absolutely none named Guinevere, or even with the initial G. Shit. She was at his mercy. She had to wait for him to call or show up, and what if he didn't? She pushed the thought into a dark closet and shut it in there. Lit another cigarette, and after the second drag, went to the fridge and got another beer, took it to the bedroom. There, she took out all the pages she'd taken from Nikki's hotel room and consolidated them, unfolding the new ones from her pocket and laying them on her bed next to the ones with the shiny dark gray of graphite already revealing their messages. She got the pencil and her chessboard, took them to the bed and sat down cross-legged on it, laid one piece of paper on the chessboard for a solid backing and started rubbing. The indented images of her own face appeared in white against the gray, and she smiled, stared at them for a long time when she was done. The next one was hotel stationery. When she'd finished darkening it, she leaned back to lie against her pillows, falling into them, and started reading. Some of the things he'd written about her she had to read 2 or 3 times, slowly following every loop and jag of his handwriting with her eyes, imagining his hand pressing a very lucky pen against the piece of paper that had lain on top of this one. That same hand that held her, caressed her, that hand that... She let go of the paper with one hand, rested it on the buckle of her belt, fingers starting to knead on it absently. Stopped abruptly, sitting up and grabbing another sheet of stationery again. Rubbed the edge of the pencil lead to bring out the words and doodles and pushed the chessboard aside, loosening her belt and freed the button of her jeans. Lay down on her stomach with her feet up in the air behind her, set the page before her on the bedspread and snaked her hand into her jeans. Nev had gone back into the alley nearby to give the bodies in the dumpster another look, paranoid, thinking that maybe the garbage bags covering them wasn't enough. Maybe the dolly being in there would arouse suspicion. She knew if she found it in her dumpster. They'd just heaved the thing up and over the rim and dropped it in there, took off running, glad to be rid of the bodies and not reconsidering until later. After such a terrifying morning, Megan wanted nothing but to lie in Nick's arms and feel his massive... What the f... She frowned, leaning closer to the paper, squinting at the word dark room. Very shallow indentations from a much earlier page on the pad, barely legible. In the dark room, at obviously numbers, a time, bring, my dear, meet me, dark room, my dearest, written over and over and over in someone else's handwriting. She stared at the words for a long time, drawing a complete blank, her mind processing nothing, just reading and rereading, feeling a mounting fear. Who could have written on that pad other than Nick? Who would have? It wasn't him, though. She knew it wasn't his handwriting. Wait a minute. Echoes of conversations came back to her, and the short hairs prickled on the back of her neck. Nick's voice saying, I can copy a signature, a sculpture, a lamp, a portrait. Nick's voice saying, I can copy a sculpture, a lamp, a portrait, or a signature. Sorry. Megan stared at the incoherent jumble of words. This was practice. Oh my God. Nev's voice. I found the note. It said my love. Had Sage's name on the bottom. Who the fuck else could it be for? Well, now I know. His boyfriend. But where did you find it, Nev? Sage just left a note lying around for you to find? Then his fag lover couldn't have found it, could he? If you found it, then obviously the other guy didn't. And if he didn't, then how'd he know to meet Sage in the dark room? Unless... And why was there a dolly right by the stairs? And why were there bungee cords? Really, why? And big garbage bags, bigger than the trash can. Why were all these things just conveniently there for us to find? Oh my God. No, that's ridiculous. Get a grip on yourself. There's gotta be a reasonable explanation for all this. You're just being paranoid. The front door flew open and slammed shut, startling the shit out of Megan. She yanked her hand out of her pants just in time for Nev to come flying into the room, her eyes wild. Meg, she choked. What? Christ, what is it? Goddamn bodies are gone, Niv hissed. What? The dolly's in there, the bungee cords, all the garbage, but no bodies? They're gone!